This is Andrae Gonzales. This is Precious 957. This is The Skinny. This is a podcast where I talk to people who can teach me something or who have made a positive impact in their community or both. Andrae, you're pretty qualified for that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So real quick, we might want to put our feet up for a second because I'm going to talk about Andre's qualifications. I've got quite the amount of notes on here. Stop me if any of these are untrue, but I think they are true.
Right.
You wear a cape and you fly around the city solving crimes.
Not true.
Not true. Okay. So
not that I'll admit.
Yeah, absolutely. So Andrae was born and raised in the Central Valley. He is a UC Berkeley grad. He is the vice mayor of Bakersfield. He is a Ward 2 city council member, former trustee on the Bakersfield City School District Board of Education, current chairman of the city council's Budget and Finance Committee, member of the Legislative and Litigation Committee, member of the Safe Neighborhoods Committee. He represents the city of Bakersfield on the Kern Economic Development Corporation Board of Directors, the CEO of Stewards, which is a Bakersfield-based nonprofit. He is the founder of Faith in Action Kern County, Children First, Kern Alliance Nonprofits, and Hub of Bakersfield, the current chair of the Housing and Homelessness Committee. He's a member of the Water Resources Committee, and he has also served as the chairman of the Tree Foundation of Bakersfield, as a board member of Bike Bakersfield, as a board member of the Kern County Black Chamber of Commerce, and as a board member of the Kern Council of Governments.
For the most part, yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, that was a lot. That was probably the thing I was most nervous about in this whole thing. Was I going to break down doing that? Well, I really appreciate you coming in. I got in contact with you. I started following you on Instagram because we had an incident outside of the building. There was some waste outside of our building, and Kai, our salesperson, told me to reach out to you. She actually reached out to you for me because I'm a shy boy. But and
Shy and Kai.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's our team. That's our power team. Yeah. So, and then I was like, okay, I see you everywhere. We go to Precious 957. We're at all these community events.
Yeah.
Where we are, you are. You're always there, no matter what. And so I see that you're very plugged in. You do everything, and I'm like, I want to talk to this guy on my show. And then the first thing I thought of was homelessness. You graciously were cool about it. And then I found out that you're like the guy to talk about in town when it comes to homelessness. It's perfect.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what the city is current. Well, first of all, I had a prompt for you. One thing that I wanted to talk about that a kind of a jumping off point for us is the prompt is the issue of homelessness in Kern County is an issue of blank. What would you say to that?
It's an issue of dignity and humanity, basic humanity.
Okay.
Homelessness is something that is a crisis for our community, a crisis for our society, a crisis for the state and the West Coast, but most importantly, it's a crisis for the individuals who are experiencing homelessness every single day. And we as a society are becoming somewhat hardened to the reality that homelessness exists. Sometimes we're a bit dismissive. In the worst of times, we're a bit frustrated and angry that we have to see certain blights in our community as a result of homelessness. And I get all of that feedback from community members. I get the whole gamut. Mm-hmm. But for me, and as a community leader, I recognize that people who are unhoused tonight and today are also my constituents. They're also people that I represent on the city council. Mm-hmm. And so I have to take a holistic approach and a holistic look at our community and figure out how do we best serve our community as a whole, addressing this crisis that many of our community members are experiencing every single night. It sounds cliche, but it's true. These are people who are brothers, who are sisters, who are sons and daughters, who are mothers and fathers. These are people that could be my uncle who's has had and lived with schizophrenia for well over 40 years, ever since I've known him. Yeah. But if it wasn't for my dad and my uncles and aunts who wrapped around him and made sure he was housed, he would be one of those individuals. He would be on the street suffering. Mm-hmm. And who would care for him in a way that's compassionate, that's loving, that delivers the respect and dignity that as a human being he ought to have?
Yeah.
This is someone's child, someone's family member out on the street, and we have to remember that.
Yeah, I love that you led with that because that's actually, I wrote this down. People without homes are human beings who deserve to be treated with respect. And though we look at these issues and we look at how we can best improve these issues, I want to stay away from the word solve, because I don't think it's an issue that we're overall going to solve. But we can look at ways to improve these issues, while also it has to be part of it to understand that these are human beings that deserve dignity.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we cannot other the individual, right? Yeah. We cannot say those people are homeless. Mm-hmm. And I hate the term when people say, formerly homeless person. It's like, when the hell does someone lose their moniker? It's like a stigma, right? Yeah. Like, I'm formerly homeless. No, you're now housed. You're a member of society who was experiencing homelessness at one point.
That's a great way to say it.
But it's not a characteristic that's defined and etched in your, soul forever.
Yeah, and that's something you're going to see. I'm trying really hard. Everybody has implicit biases.
Exactly. But let me go a little bit further.
Sorry, I apologize. Yeah.
All of us, every single one of us can become homeless. Mm-hmm. Every single one of us can fall into bad times.
Yes.
Can experience something that will cause us to experiencing houselessness for whatever reason, whether it be one episode of a mental health episode. There's many examples where individuals who are perfectly, quote unquote, fine, right? And suddenly experiencing significant behavioral health issues one day.
Yeah.
And grew into something. Or perhaps a traumatic experience in life that has caused a behavioral health or mental health issue. Mm-hmm. Or perhaps, we make a mistake and we, try one too many substances that causes us to have a chemical reaction that then forces us unable to function properly, hold a job, maintain relationships, therefore, so on and so forth. Many folks depend on a relative to pay the rent.
Yeah.
God forbid a relative passes away unexpectedly, or God forbid someone loses their home because of hard times, losing a job, or divorce, or domestic violence, or I can go on and on and on. Any one of us can become homeless. And the programs and the projects that I've been working on over the last 5 years, I've had that mindset of the fact that it is not for the homeless person solely, the person experiencing homelessness today. Mm-hmm. It is for all of us in the community should we find ourselves unhoused one day.
Yeah,
including myself. I think about it.
Yeah.
What would it take for me to become unhoused? And I will admit, it's not very much.
It's a slippery slope, and that's one thing that I love that, because many people, I think everybody has fallen victim to it at certain points in their life, unless they have personally experienced it or know somebody who's experienced it. You see people out there living on the streets. You see somebody outside of a business or something like that. You assume they're just a ne'er-do-well, an addict, or somebody who, and a lot of them are addicts, but there's reasoning behind that. We just see them as lost souls, as if it is entirely their fault and they have control over it completely.
I have met people with graduate degrees.
Yeah.
I met people who have had businesses, who have had professional jobs, who are now experiencing homelessness.
Yeah.
And it's just a series of events in their lives that have led them to this crisis today. Mm-hmm. And it is not just episodic. It's not just the individual circumstance that finds themselves homeless. We have to also understand that this is a systemic issue.
Yeah.
Right? There are systems in place that are not working, that are causing lots and lots of people to fall homeless. Years past, we've always had people who've experienced, who've lived with substance abuse disorders, right? Who've had addiction issues, or who have had behavioral health issues. That is not new.
Yes.
So what is new? The fact that we have fewer available affordable housing units available in this community and in the state. We have an affordability crisis. We have a housing crisis, period, even for folks who can afford housing. Market rate housing is still in short supply and had been during the pandemic. That's only exacerbated the housing crisis. So if you think about it in terms of a game of musical chairs. Mm-hmm. You've played musical chairs. I'm sure many of your listeners have. And so we play this game of musical chairs. Everyone sits down, finds a seat. You pull away a seat, then you pull a couple of seats away. And there's going to be a few folks who don't have a seat. Mm-hmm. They're out of the game.
Yes.
That's what's happening in our community with regards to homelessness and housing, is that, we have more and more people entering the market looking for housing, and we're pulling away units. We're pulling away housing units. Well, someone is going to get left out. Mm-hmm. Someone's going to get the chair pulled away from them. And that is the systemic issue that we're experiencing today. And there are a lot of other issues that are also exasperating this issue, not just the housing issue. It's also behavioral health, right? We have a system that is not functioning to best serve those individuals who are experiencing both behavioral health issues and substance abuse disorders. And there's a long, complicated system in place that is not working well, but we're trying to get at it. And the state is trying to. The good news is the state is really getting it now and really trying to combat this.
Good, because one of the things that I saw was a quote from you from, I believe, last year, where you said the city is doing a lot of stuff, but the city alone cannot do it all. We cannot do it all. We don't have a behavioral health department, for example. We don't have a jail of our own. We can't change state law at the city council. So I was going to ask you, what state laws, we don't have to get like specific to numbers and stuff, but give a gist of what can affect this issue.
Well, let me just start with one that's overarching. It's called the Lanterman-Patriot Short Act, LPS. It was adopted in the 1960s, and the reason why it was adopted was because we were having a crisis with our mental health institutions at the time. We had state mental hospitals that were over-committing individuals, that were committing folks who weren't really experiencing mental health disorders. It was the system was being abused, and the condition of the hospitals were horrid.
Yeah,
it was awful. And now I wasn't alive at the time. I'm just reading and hearing from other people, and so the state really had to respond. And so what they had done at that time was move the center of care from state hospitals, regional hospitals, these psychiatric hospitals, into communities where the community was supposed to, the counties were responsible for addressing the needs of these individuals. Well, that didn't work out all too well. In addition to that, they raised the bar in statute, in law. They raised the bar through which a law enforcement officer or a professional healthcare provider or mental health professional can actually commit someone into treatment. Mm-hmm. If you've heard the term 5150 individual, when someone is experiencing an episode, psychological psychiatric episode, that they are then committed to and given a hold at Mary Kay Shell locally, right?
Is it like 48 hours?
40 hours or 72 hours.
Yeah.
But oftentimes they're not even committed that long, because they're deemed okay because of the high bar, the high threshold that the law has set. They have to be a grave danger to themselves and to others, and it has to be sort of an imminent threat. So that's changing, right? The legislature just adopted a new piece of legislation that will change that process and reduce the barrier so that it makes it easier for people for professionals to compel someone into treatment.
So you're saying it was kind of an overreaction to the initial?
It was a complete overreaction.
Okay,
and if you study politics and political science and public policy enough, you will find that most of our public policy failures are a result of overreaction, right? It's the proverbial pendulum that swings from one direction to the next. We often swing far one direction and we have to kind of correct. And now we're kind of in this correction mode where we're recognizing that it was a bit of an overreaction. We had to make sure that we don't overreact the other way as well.
That's the thing. You always want the pendulum to react to gravity and finally settle. You know what I mean?
That's
it
correct.
Just doesn't always
and
do
that's
that.
why reasonable people ought to be elected government, right? To these elected offices, that we have to be sure to really discern who we're electing into office. But I'll get off of that topic and get to the point. We also have Care Court that's coming. Care Court will actually allow a judge to make a decision on behalf of the individual. It's not a conservatorship necessarily, but will be able to compel a person into a certain treatment plan and into housing for 2 years, and will also require the county and the city to also participate in a housing plan and provide wraparound services so that that individual can succeed. This will be a new model. I'm pushing the county and the city to get on it. We have until the end of 2024 in order to implement our Care Court system. I think that's way too long. We need it now. We need to start piloting it now, because, and the critics of me will say, well, that won't solve the problem. That'll only solve a handful of cases, right? That will be good for maybe, half a dozen, maybe a dozen individuals. But for those individuals, it will mean the world. And for many of us in the community who are experiencing the effects of unhoused, there's a lot of issues that come along with it that many people in the community have to bear. They're called negative externalities, right?
Yeah.
Someone pays for that negative externality, and it's often the business owner, the property owner in downtown. It's often the residents who live in the urban core, because there's a higher concentration of people who are experiencing homelessness in those areas. If we can address the issue for at least a half a dozen individuals, many of those issues start going away. It starts subsiding. And not to cast blame on anyone, but we know that there are certain behaviors that are problematic.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we have to understand. There's not going to be a decision that you make or that state legislators make or anybody that is going to be a decision that solves all the problems, because there's so many different reasons to be unhoused. It's going to take a lot of solutions like that help. Okay, it helps this pocket of people. We've taken care of those people. Now, which pocket of people do we help with this piece of legislation and this one? It's going to be patchwork, because it has to be. There's no end all, and that's one reflection of politics nowadays. We like the simplest answer in a lot of things, because people are living their lives. I understand it. People are living. They can't really focus on all these issues as much as somebody like you can. So they want a very simple solution to a lot of things. And I think that's we'll gloss over it, but that's what goes into a lot of people's election decisions. Right.
And I get it. People say, I don't care about the nuance. I don't care about
tough.
all of these things. We elected you. Get it done.
Yeah.
Get these people off the street. And as long as I see these people on the street, you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
And okay, how do I combat that? Okay, that's someone's opinion. Fine. For me, I don't really respect that opinion, because there is a lot of nuance there.
Yes.
And I push back. If this person, if you're so if you're so right on the solutions, then write a book. Write a book about how to solve homelessness and make $1 million.
Run yourself.
Yeah, or run yourself. Right. But if you're such an expert, please, by all means, go for it.
Yeah.
Tell us how to do it, and we will pay you for it. The reality is that once you get into it, it's easy to be sort of, with all due respect to everyone, but it's very easy, to be a critic 100%. On your living room couch and develop solutions that make sense to you and your loved ones, and then call it good.
Yeah,
it's very much a much more difficult task to get up, to actually address the issues head on, to go visit with unhoused people, to go take these ride-alongs with our police department impact team, with our code enforcement rapid response team, to go with our park rangers, to go with flood ministries who's there providing outreach, to spend days and days with them, trying to understand the complexities, trying to understand the gaps in services so that we can connect the dots and deliver better services and really try to help more and more people. That's the work that I've been committed to for the last 5 years.
Yes.
And we're still addressing this issue, but we are making gains. In 2018, I pushed really hard and was the chairman of the Public Safety and Vital Services Initiative. That's the 1 cent sales tax for the city of Bakersfield. Those new dollars have been a godsend for our community, because it has allowed us to do a whole host of things. namely, fund those teams I just mentioned, the rapid response team with code enforcement, the impact team with the police department, flood ministries contracts, but it's also allowed us to build the Brundage Lane Navigation Center, which is a comprehensive, low barrier navigation center for people who are experiencing homelessness. Okay. And they can go there. We started with 150 beds. The critics said nobody would go there. People would rather be on the street. It was going to be a waste of money. Do you know that within a first month or two, all of those beds were occupied? All of them. Wow. Completely occupied. People want help. People want to get off of the street. If you think about it, it is horrible to experiencing homelessness. It's a lot of work. Yeah. It's not for the lazy.
It really is.
You have to carry all of your worldly possessions with you everywhere you go. You're always trying to find a place to rest with one eye open in fear of yourself, first and foremost, right? Your personal safety, but also that someone doesn't take all of your belongings. And then you have to sort of, move around and find food every day with all of your possessions. Imagine taking everything that you owned with you all day long, everywhere you go.
My cat would not enjoy being homeless. I can tell you that. He's pampered.
I mean, and the loneliness and just the physical effects mm-hmm. of being unhoused, right? The sun exposure, the weather, elements, and having to adapt to that,
and being degraded all day. Yeah,
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of strain physically, emotionally, psychologically. So when we give a person this low barrier shelter and we say, look, you can bring your dogs, whereas in the past, shelters wouldn't let you.
Oh, okay.
You can bring all of your possessions. You don't have to get rid of them, where in the past you had to. And if you have a significant other, you both can come in and stay together. We're going to reduce those barriers to entry.
Yeah.
And you can just rest. Gain a sense of stability in your life, feel better physically, rest up, recuperate from being out in the streets. And then when you're ready, we have a housing navigator for you. Because the goal here at Brundage Lane Navigation Center is to get you housed. And our mantra is, what is your housing plan? Mm-hmm. Because this shelter is not the final destination for you.
Yeah.
We're going to find a placement. So maybe you need a driver's license. Maybe you need additional supports from behavioral health. Maybe you need substance abuse treatments. Maybe you need certain medical care. Maybe you need some job training. We have a culinary arts program so you can develop some skills and get a job. Wow. And the list goes on. But we'll connect you to whatever resource you may need so that you can get on the path to being permanently housed.
That's amazing.
And we've done this now for 3 years. We're nearing over 300 people who are going to be, who are permanently housed now. 300 people permanently housed in 3 years.
And that's a 1 cent tax on what?
That's a 1 cent sales tax, local sales tax.
Wow. Okay, that's awesome. So that part of that is the what you touched on, the myth that I hear a lot when people talk about funding for homelessness, because there's a lot of people, and I'm sure you've experienced this, there's a lot of people who come to you and say, fix it, and you're not fixing it, and we need this fixed, and they simultaneously vote no on any new spending for any programs that go towards it. And I think part of that, because I hear this a lot, is part of the myth, they don't want help. And I think obviously that's a bit of a cop-out in my opinion, but also, like we talked about, it's segmentation. There's a lot of different reasons for people being out there. There's a lot of different mentalities of the people out there. And there are some out there who will refuse help for whatever reason. There are a very small minority of them, of these people who like living a life like that. But it's a very small minority that shouldn't take away from the people out there who need the help and can use the help, and you guys have helped over the past few years.
That's right. And, we're experiencing right now, folks who are on the streets that are refusing services.
Yes.
And we engage them, and Flood engages them. We have lots of teams that go out. And about 40% of those who are engaged actually are saying, no, I'm good. I don't want to be in the shelter. I don't want to be housed. I don't want to go through it. Not today.
Mm-hmm.
They refuse. Okay. We're going to keep trying though.
Yeah.
We're going to keep on it, and we're going to try different strategies so that we can get people housed, because our goal is to get every single person who is unhoused into the shelter, into permanent housing. Easier said than done, but we're going to continue to try. So there is a segment of the population who currently are refusing, but that's ever more reason to double down on our efforts and to continue to try to help them and engage them.
And a lot of that is probably an addiction thing. It's probably
a lot of it is.
Their vice is out here,
Yep.
and it's hard to. You can't really do it in the shelter openly. You can't, like, all these things. So. That's by no means an excuse, but that is just another issue that we have to tackle before we can get these people helped.
That's correct. And I think the other thing, though, that is very frustrating for people, including myself, is that as much as we're working at pulling people out of homelessness, there's so many people actually entering homelessness at the same time. So if you imagine this pipeline, right, we have an outflow, we have people flowing out of homelessness, but you have people also continuously falling into homelessness, right? This inflow issue that is problematic. And there again, it's a systemic issue, right? When people are losing their homes because rent is increased too hard, because they get evicted or foreclosure or there's so many other reasons why somebody can find themselves on the street. We have to work now. As we're making success, we have to work on these prevention efforts as well. We have to work towards how do we prevent people from falling into homelessness, and how do we strengthen those supports. Now, again, we've identified the problem, but I haven't heard a lot of good solutions as to how to really do that well for all the various different folks who are experiencing homelessness for different reasons. There's already a lot of good work happening. There's certain diversion programs that are emerging, for example, when people find themselves homeless right away and they rapidly try to rehouse them, individuals who may have lost contact with their family, trying to connect them with another family member, those types of things. But we must, I think, turn our attention to working on that prevention piece as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is amazing. The more I hear about the housing issue, it's the more frustrated I get. The more I hear about not having, because the rent for middle class is insane too. Yep. It's going up everywhere, and there's a lot of people who can have entry level jobs, because a lot of unhoused people also lack certain job skills, and they want to get into an entry level job, and sometimes that job doesn't pay enough for them to live properly, and rent is going up while those wages aren't going up as well. And is there anything locally being done in terms of, I don't know, the word rent control is thrown around in terms of the rising costs of rent? Can we do anything locally, or is that more of a state and federal thing?
So there are limits to what local cities can do when it comes to rent control. There is a rent control law in place statewide right now. And
is it like a percentage it can't go up?
It's a percentage that can't go up.
Okay.
I think it's 5%. It's ultimately 10% annually.
Okay.
So there's that piece. But really, I mean, when you take a harder look at this, it's really a function of supply, right? There's just aren't enough units available. We're not building housing fast enough, and we haven't built affordable housing fast enough to keep up with the demand. And one of the reasons is, and I have complained about this statewide and locally for years now, is that in 2011, the state of California ended what's called redevelopment agencies. These dollars were available for cities to reinvest in development projects in their local municipalities statewide. Okay. So in Bakersfield, we were able to fund a lot of upgrades to downtown. That 19th and I intersection looks very nice.
Yes.
Funded through redevelopment. Mill Creek Linear Park, again, redevelopment project. Some of the work in Old Town Kern, redevelopment project. We were able to buy certain properties. But the other thing that redevelopment did, which was significant beyond the kind of more superficial and facade improvement type
beautification
work,
stuff,
beautification stuff, was affordable housing production and financing affordable housing units. And we were able to do some good work back in the day with redevelopment. Well, that all went away in 2011 because of the state budget cuts. Basically, it was funded through property taxes in the local government. That's a short way of saying it. Well, you think about it. 2011, you ended the primary mechanism for municipalities throughout the state to actually fund and finance and produce affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And then 10 years later, you have an affordable housing crisis. It doesn't take a genius to see the connection, right?
Yeah.
You miss out on 10 years of housing production, and you start to see the problems. Eventually the problems will catch up with you, and they've caught up with us. And so now we have to invest and double down. We created, the city of Bakersfield, again, thanks to PSVS and thanks to the voters, we created a housing trust fund where we are able to invest $5 million annually into this trust fund. Because we do that, we're able to get a matching grant from the state of about $3 million or so. So that means $8 million every single year we're able to turn around and award to housing developers to build more affordable housing units. And we're ramping up. We're continuously building new units. We have about 80 units that are about to break ground on Kentucky and Baker Street in Old Town Kern, the Renaissance project. I've been working on that project for 7 years. We finally got a developer in place. They got the financing worked out, and we're going to break ground on this project. But that was a 7-year deal.
Yeah.
So these things take a long time, but there are other ways, and there are creative ways in which we are going to try to accelerate it. City also has some dollars from our American Rescue Plan funding. These are federal dollars as a result of COVID to purchase properties, to purchase homes, so that we can then turn them around and build affordable housing units. Mm-hmm. And so we want to do that. One of the other issues that's really important to me is that we really focus in on local ownership, local home ownership for our residents in Bakersfield, because I'm very concerned that there's so many out-of-town investors who are coming in, providing all cash offers, buying up properties and locking them up and turning them into rentals. And the last thing I want is all of Ward 2 and parts of East Bakersfield to be, just a bunch of rental units. I want people to own homes. I want families to be able to have access to that American dream and own their home. And along with that comes wealth creation, the ability for them to build an asset for themselves and for their children and grandchildren. Yes. They have that resource. And in doing that, they're able to, many of our families, that's the pathway to move out of poverty and into the middle class. And we know that nationwide, the middle class is under assault. Mm-hmm. And it's either the super, super rich and the poor and struggling. And it's the gap is widening. So this is a way for us to help build assets, help strengthen the middle class. And we're going to, and I'm pushing on different programs and strategies for us to really accelerate that home ownership and the ability for people to own their own home.
Yeah, I think we're going to hear a lot about that in the upcoming election in next November, in the big one, because that is a growing issue in the United States. As giant companies are buying up a lot of real estate and in really aiding the housing crisis across the board in a lot of ways. So, it's really good that you want to address that, and I think that's, like I said, I think that's going to be a big issue when we start voting next year. So just to wrap it up, this has been so informative. I really appreciate it. We talked about what needs to be done. We know that we can we can tell our citizens to vote. We can vote on legislation to help this. What else can they do? You talked about flood ministries. We've spoken with them locally. We really like that organization as well as is there Does the Brundage Lane Navigation Center, something like that, are there ways to donate to that, or is that just straight from the tax?
No, absolutely. They're always looking for supplemental donations and clothing to help people, food items, and Mercy House is the nonprofit that actually runs the Brundage Lane Navigation Center. But we also have the mission at Kern County that does wonderful work. And they also house men, and also they have homes for women and children. They do great work. The Open Door Network is our other shelter run by a nonprofit. They've done work for years in this community, helping women and children and families. They do an incredible job. And then the county also has a navigation center on M Street called the M Street Navigation Center. And Community Action Partnership of Kern County actually runs that facility. Again, they have a great group of folks who are working there. So there's a lot of effort right now. There's a lot of groups who are really, taking the bull by the horns and addressing this crisis. And certainly we can use all the help we can get from lots of different people.
Okay, cool. And there's I know Flood Ministries does fundraisers.
Yes.
Look up all of these different organizations that he mentioned on anything that we've posted. We will put it on the caption. We will link all of these things. And if we missed you, if you're an organization out there that does it, he did a real good job of listing a lot of them. You can't list them all, but we really seek out places in Kern County where you can volunteer, where you can give your money, and make sure that you're voting for legislation that you believe helps this issue, because it's not going. The last thing is, we're not going to arrest this issue away. Do you agree with that?
No, there's no way.
Yes.
There's no way to do that. And I think that is a complete misnomer. And there's a sentiment out there that somehow we just need to push people out to a field somewhere.
Yeah.
But remember, we live in a country full of rights and civil rights and certain basic freedoms. And just because someone is unhoused does not mean they have to be confined to a field outside of city limits.
We don't want the government to further tell us where we can stand.
Right.
Like
right.
it seems simple. It seems like to a lot of people that it's a solution to our problems, especially the arresting thing, because they just assume all these people are drug addicts and criminals. Right. And there are times when an arrest needs to be made. Obviously, but we're not going to arrest this issue away. We're going to legislate this issue away. We're going to and give these people dignity, and that's going to help us help them in a way. And so make sure we're voting correctly. Make sure we really read what this money is going towards, and trust that somebody like Andrae is on the other side and is going to make sure that the funds are used properly. Because if we're hearing you today, you can tell that you care about this, and that this is something that you've really focused on and you're educated on, and you want to make better. Like I said, I want to stay away from solve, because you can be successful without fully solving this issue. And I appreciate everything you're doing. So
thank you so much. Appreciate
it. Keep listening to The Skinny. Keep listening to Precious957. Follow Andrae on Instagram. What is your Instagram handle?
Andrae Gonzales, Andrae Gonzales.
Yes, and it's a good follow. You really get to hear about what's happening in Bakersfield by following Andrae. And thank you for listening. Bye-bye.